guys. Everyone's going to die,
Some people are genuinely interested. Others are kind of standoffish. Maybe they've, had a traumatic experience, whatever it is. It's just emotionally, there's so much there.
We answer the call. We go to wherever that person passed at, make the transfer back to the funeral home, schedule an arrangement meeting.
If we're doing the job well, we think about these people too. Welcome back to the LifeChoice Hospice and Palliative Care podcast. Today we're joined by Ross Marizo from Marizo Funeral Home and Cremation. Ross, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
For those who are not familiar with Marizo Funeral Home and Cremation, can you share a little bit about your family business, right?
Yeah. So it's a family business. I'm third generation. We're located in Hoffman Estates, right off of I-90 and Barrington Road. I'm third generation funeral director. So growing up in it, it was always my dad and my uncle. We lived above it when we were in the city.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So, growing up, I always thought that we had a party going on downstairs. There was always people around and stuff. I'd take my little sippy cup of milk and go down into the office with my dad and stuff like that. But, yeah, we've always been a family business and I'm the third generation now with it.
Very cool. Well, thank you for sharing. I think it's a very unique, I think family business and I think profession. Sure. And I think that probably when some people hear like funeral home cremation, everyone gets really uncomfortable. Certainly in like hospice world, we're very used to it happening all the time, right? We have to call you guys when this happens for every single patient. And so I think one thing that I kind of gained from our last meeting was like working to normalize this conversation, right? It's so hopefully that it's less of a taboo subject, right? I think you said something that really stuck with me. It was like, I was talking to this group of people and I asked them like, what is the mortality rate of
people in your area?
Of people in your area.
Yeah, it was like an icebreaker. I mean, everyone's, when they hear hospice, funeral homes, they're standoffish. And I was like, so guys, do you know, like I pulled your zip code and figured out what the mortality rate is here. What is it? People are like, 30%. I was like, it's 100 guys. Everyone's going to die. I mean, it's what it is. I'm going to die. You're going to die. It's inevitable. So, going back to kind of what you were saying too, when you're like trying to normalize the conversation, I'm sure you get it all the time. If you go out somewhere and you meet new people and they're like, oh, what do you do? I'm a teacher. I'm in insurance. I'm this. And then I'll be like, oh, I'm a funeral director. Yeah. It's always like, can I ask you a question? And it's like, it kind of stops there and then it just goes in a weird path. Like it's something that's everyone has questions about, but no one knows how to, who to ask and stuff. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, the whole field of like death and dying is, some people are genuinely interested. Others are kind of standoffish. Maybe they've, had a traumatic experience, whatever it is. It's just emotionally, there's so much there.
For sure.
And so just, I would love to kind of talk for those watching, who are not familiar with what happens, right? So when we have someone who's on service with us and they die, right? So you receive a phone call, right?
Right.
What happens at that point?
So we're 24/7, just like you guys are. So somebody calls, it doesn't matter if it's noon on a Tuesday or 2 a.m. on a Saturday, we answer the call. We go to wherever that person passed at, make the transfer back to the funeral home, schedule an arrangement meeting. It's time for the family to come in, talk about what the plans are. If it's going to be a burial, cremation, are we going to have to, arrange for a church service? Are we doing something at the funeral home? Is it going to be a cremation with a memorial service? There's a lot that goes into it. Mm-hmm. And just like everything else, you can work as fast as you can, but you got to wait on other people to kind of get their ducks in a row too.
And on that note, I've had different cases come up over the years, and I think something probably the general public isn't aware of is when someone dies and they don't have healthcare power of attorney, someone assigned, and they don't have a blood relative who's a next of kin, we have a real problem. It's a nightmare, right?
Yeah. It's amazing what like one little paper could really just save you so much time and headache, even with families, even a big family, 5 kids, 6 kids, everyone has different opinions. If somebody has that one piece of paper that says their medical power of attorney, conversation ends, like there doesn't have to be all the fighting, if the people didn't pre-plan in advance, but they assign somebody that medical power of attorney, it's really alleviates a lot of the problems.
We had a case that the patient was receiving excellent care from his stepdaughter. We have the paperwork. We don't have the paperwork. We're going to find the paperwork. Patient dies. There is no paperwork.
There never is.
Patient had estranged children from no one knew where they were. The stepdaughter was like, I know exactly what he wants. He shared this with me. This is what he wants. He wants to be cremated. The coroner's office was involved. The funeral home or the cremation places at this point is like, listen, I can't.
We can't do anything. Our
I
hands are tied.
can't do anything, and I am stepping back from the situation because without any documentation in place, your hands are tied too.
And it's brutal when people are estranged and stuff like that. A lot of times it comes down to, you hate to say it, the dollar, like at a time like that. So if you talk to the estranged daughter and they're like, well, I haven't talked to my dad for 30 years. I'm not paying for this. And it's like, no one's asking you to pay for it. Like, here's a document that you could sign that you're relinquishing kind of all your rights and financial obligations. But, we kind of live in a sue culture type of thing nowadays. So everyone's kind of worried about everything, We have to follow the rules. We can't take you on your word because if something happens down the road, it's us that's in trouble.
Right. So even, when we have patients in facility, right? So when a patient dies at home, there's a lot more, I think, leeway in terms of, how long the person can stay there. I've had families do it for several hours. Maybe someone's driving in from out of town. We'll work with them on that. But when patients are in a facility setting, facilities have very strict they're not capable of holding a body, right? Well, they don't have.
A lot of times it's a shared room situation too. So they don't want that person being deceased in that room for
hours and hours and hours.
3+ hours, they want that person removed right away.
Right.
So
in those cases, let's talk about worst case scenario. And then maybe we can talk about best case scenario and kind of what people can do to hopefully plan better.
Okay. Yeah. That's the best.
Worst case scenario, if we have someone who has absolutely no arrangements, what happens if they, call?
Okay. As long as whenever we get a call, we start meeting with the family. Sometimes the person's 95 years old, been on hospice for 2.5 months. I'm talking to the family and they're like, this just came as a total surprise. It's like, we never had these conversations with mom and stuff. It's like, how would you never have these conversations? Mom is 95, been on hospice. Hospice is a terminal, it's terminal. There's very few people who come off a hospice and stuff like that.
You don't go on to hospice if you're well.
Yeah, exactly. So, you kind of just have to educate people. And sometimes people come in, they know exactly what's going on. They know when Dad died, we had a visitation, a church service at this church. We have cemetery property already and stuff like that. A lot of people come in just completely blind to it. So we just kind of have to talk through all the options, I was kind of talking about family dynamic earlier, you know. Do you have any brothers and sisters?
I have a sister.
Okay. You guys always agree on everything, right? Right?
Don't all siblings?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, we see people at the best and at the worst times. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times families come in and, you know, one sister wants burial, brother wants cremation. Yeah. There's another brother who's just interested in the life insurance policy, you know, or something like that. So you see the full gamut. So you kind of just have to kind of work with them and see what exactly they're looking for and what kind of appeases everybody. Mm-hmm. Again, if one person has that power of healthcare document, they're the ones making the shots.
Mm-hmm. So I think, you know, best case scenario really is having the documents on hand, having those conversations and revisiting those conversations with your loved one periodically.
Or even,
right?
We even have a lot of people, I mean, pre-need is very popular. People come in when they're healthy. Yeah. You know, we just had one a couple months ago where it was a husband and wife, their kids, one of them lives in California, one of them lives in New York. They were young. The kids were just graduating college and stuff like that. And they're like, Ross, if something happened to us, our kids know nothing. They don't know what to do. They don't know where they would even find our social security numbers and stuff like that. So it's like we put all their wishes down. We can either fund it. If they fund it, it's held with a pre-need company. You know, the monies can't be touched. It's irrevocably assigned. So like the state can't even count it as an asset. So a lot of people do stuff like that just to eliminate any potential problems in the back end. But yeah, that happens literally all the time.
So I think for those watching who are thinking, oh, you know, it's easy to say, you know, have everything on file. I think you have a very real firsthand experience within your own family. Yeah. And maybe you can share about that.
So we've done kind of a panel discussion before, and we've gone to a couple of different places where we've had everybody from hospice, attorneys, cemetery companies, at-home health cares. And for me, it's, you know, I'm an only child. So it was me, my mom, and my dad. I worked with my dad, and one day he came to work and he was just off, you know, and I called my mom. I was like, what's going on? You know, and she's like, I don't know. Dad was off too. So it turned out he had a brain tumor. So at that point, that was on a Friday, like our whole world's kind of changed overnight. And again, we preach this stuff to people all the time. When it happens to us, it was completely different. You know, we had a business, you know, so I'm looking at my dad's will and stuff like that. And the last time they updated it, I think it was in the 80s. And I was still going to my grandma. You know, if something happened to my parents, I was going to my grandma. She's been dead for like, you know, 15 years at this point. So, you know, we preach a lot of stuff, but it doesn't really, you know, like even when we go to events and we talk about stuff, it makes total sense. It really does. And then when it happens to you, it's like, oh man, I didn't do any of that, you know? So, you know, when I found out my dad was sick, we called up a home healthcare company who we know really well, you know, Dawn. She was great. She kind of helped me out through everything so I could kind of focus on him. But then I had to figure out the whole business, the legalese portion of all of it and stuff like that. And I was trying to do that so my mom could be, you know, with my dad, like during it, and figure out his health, figure out what's next and stuff. And, you know, there's just a million things that happen, and you try to plan for everything in your head, but until you put it out on paper and stuff like that, it really means nothing.
Right. And I think this is something that we talk with the general public. We talk with people all the time about it, right? Plan ahead, do this, do this, do this. Within my own family, I know when my father-in-law got sick, it was like, okay, he's going into hospice. I was like shocked, and I shouldn't have been shocked because it was so much leading up to that point. But I think when it's even if it's your profession, when it's your family, it feels different. Totally different. Yeah. You are like a fish out of water.
I can talk to families all day and kind of give them advice, but then when it's on you and it's your own family, you're like, wait a minute. You just kind of go blank, you know? Mm-hmm. And it was like, at the time, I wanted to make sure, obviously my dad was getting the best health care and, we could do whatever for him. I have my mom who I wanted to make sure was taken care of and taking care of him. Like that was her role, And then I'm married. I have 3 little kids at home trying to figure out that stuff. And then you got the business that we worked together for like 10 years, but we each had our very separate roles, like he did all the finance, bookkeeping stuff. I did more operational stuff. Mm-hmm. So when it came time to it, and I was like, and he was an old school kind of guy, so I was just like you try to figure it out. And all the stuff we've been, even me and him, we were talking about it for years and before, like, oh, I should do this. And there's always an excuse, we'll do it next month. We'll wait till the quarter ends. We'll wait till next year, So it happens. I mean, we preach it all the time, but we don't practice it as well as we should.
What do you think are things that may surprise people about, funeral homes or crematories, things that might surprise the general public that you think they should be aware of?
As far as
different process things that they should be aware of or anything like that.
I think people think that people either have 2 different ways of thinking, I think. Mm-hmm. Today is what day? Today's Wednesday. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, today's Wednesday. We want a cremation, so you're going to do that right now, right? And it's like, well, no, like there's a lot of legal steps you got to take, a lot of permits you got to obtain and stuff like that. So that's not like right away.
Can we talk about the specifics of that so people get a general idea on like what actually is going on behind the scenes, right? It's not just, now I want things done. All right, I'll be back tomorrow to pick up the urn.
Yeah.
Right?
So from the time somebody passes, we'll make an arrangement conference. Like I said, we'll get all the information that goes on the death certificate. Mm-hmm. At that point, we fax it to the doctor. Mm-hmm. We're still one of those weird industries that uses fax for things, Mm-hmm. So we'll fax it through the state database to the doctor. The doctor needs to either physically sign it, electronically sign it. Yep. Then they fax it back to the state. Mm-hmm. The state faxes it to us to input the information, and then we can apply for like permits. If a doctor signs a death certificate on Friday at 4:00, nothing's going to happen over the weekend. The state, if we send it off to the state, there's nothing they can do because there's not people there, So if we miss our window of getting doctor sign and getting permits, then we can't do anything until Monday. Mm-hmm. Each county is different. Cook County handles a lot more families than like some of the smaller counties, so maybe not the fastest turnaround time.
Sure.
But so it's not an overnight process.
Mm-hmm. And I've even had it with some patients, right? The funeral home will reach out to us and they're like, we're still waiting on this death certificate. In those cases, we usually will say, like, please send it to us, right? If our medical director is going to be the one signing off on it, send it to us. We'll make sure they do it. But sometimes it can be that waiting period of like, the doctors taking their time or
doctors
whatever.
Can take their time. Doctors have lives too. I mean, they could be on vacation. They could be doing something with their family. It's just because they're a doctor doesn't mean that they're there 24/7. Mm-hmm. And even if they do see it, they still have to sign it, review it, review the medical chart and stuff, and then fax it over. So there's a lot of stuff that kind of holds us up. Mm-hmm. Even if we're going to have a burial and we're not dealing with like the cremation aspect of it, we might be meeting with a family. They're like, we want to have a visitation on Tuesday, church on Wednesday with a burial. It's like, that's great. Mm-hmm. Like we can accommodate it at the funeral home. Like we have to see if the church is available, depending on the day, it's hard to get a hold of a priest or the church and stuff like that. So it's just, I kind of was telling one of my friends the other day, I was like, I'm kind of like planning a party that no one wants to go to. You know what I mean? Like it's, you know, you're trying to like coordinate a bunch of different things, but people don't want to go to funerals.
Sure.
You know?
I think something that people might have a general idea on, but really don't know specifics. You know, I've seen things where someone might use their, like a life insurance policy to help pay
For sure.
towards the cost of this. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I can't speak for all funeral homes
Of
and stuff
course,
like that, but
of
I mean,
course.
like, for example, for us, we take an assignment on a life insurance policy. So say it's a $20,000 policy, the funeral bill is $10,000. You're the beneficiary of the policy. We'd have you kind of sign over a couple forms. So then once we get the death certificate, we'll handle all the paperwork on the back end, you know, because that's a pain too, to be honest with you. But then the life insurance company will issue us a check for the funeral amount, you a check for the balance and stuff like that.
Got it.
Yeah. So it's just another way to help families. I mean, when I meet with families, I know they probably retain about like 60% of what I say, you know, and that's being generous, you know. And they'll be like, well, where's this document? And I tell them, I'm like, I'll give you everything at once. I'm not going to piecemeal things to you because your brain's not in it right now, you know, especially after hospice. You know, a family member might be sick for the last couple months, but then like the last 2 weeks they're on hospice. No one's sleeping if the person's on hospice and stuff. And the last thing that they want to do on no sleep is pick out prayer cards and, you know, and do these little things that I know they don't want to sit there and do, but they kind of have to, so we can kind of move forward with everything.
What happens in the case that there's no, like, have you ever had a case where the deceased comes to the funeral home and there's like an issue with payment, like the family steps out and then they don't want to do anything? Like, what happens at that point?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of happens all the time. Funerals aren't the cheapest thing, you know? I mean, they're expensive. There's a lot that goes into it. I used to teach a class at like a high school that my mom taught at, their health class, and teach a lesson on death and dying, you know? And I would ask people, how much do you think a funeral costs? You know, somebody's like $400, $100 grand, you know? And it ran the gamut. And I used to say, like, you know, how much do you think caskets are, you know? And tell them it could be, you know, $1,500. It could go up to $50,000. It's like buying a car. Price always comes into it, especially if people are looking at like a couple different caskets too. And it's like, well, we like these two. And it's like, well, this one's like $3,000. This one's $5,000. Like,
It's a big difference.
It's it's $2,000, you know, like it's a lot to think of.
And I think sometimes people don't have an idea. They really, I mean, let's be real. Not many people want to think about this, right? But having a general idea of actually what this costs, right? Because I've had families who are having serious financial issues, right? Trouble paying for care, whatever that might be. And, you know, they say, well, I want a funeral. How are we going to fund this? Do you have a policy? Do you not have a policy?
We do. I mean, like, again, every funeral home's different, whether it's like we're family owned. So we're not like a corporate funeral home that's like, you know, they have their corporate rules that you have to follow. We kind of work with families a little bit more. Like, it's not something we want to do, but you know, we just have this lady who buried her husband. This was 5 years ago now, like 4.5 years ago. She's been paying $100 a month, you know, and it was like, she's almost done paying it off, you know, and stuff like that. But, you know, we don't charge interest and stuff like that, but you can't do that with every family, you know, and stuff. But when people are diligent and they're actually putting forth the effort, you know, and stuff, and you know, it means a lot, we're more than happy to like do whatever, you know. Usually people pay within a month, you know, a couple payments or something like that. It's also too very ethnic. So like some ethnicities, they kind of raise money kind of at the funeral
Oh, interesting.
And you'll kind of be giving like 5 singles, and
wow.
stuff like that. Some people, I was on the phone right before we left here. It was somebody's sister passed, and they didn't have the money for it, so we were going over stuff, and now a friend who's lives like 4 hours away is gonna pay for it, but she wants things changed and stuff like that.
Oh,
so
wow. Interesting.
It kind of keeps changing as you deal with families and stuff like that. But yeah, we've never turned down a family due to
inability to pay
finances.
There are some benefits. I think that it's been changing recently with the VA, right, for veterans to receive some funding for this, depending on level of service connection.
Right.
In terms of your involvement with that for veterans, is it something that, do you submit anything to the VA or?
Yeah, I mean, so VA is great. They offer a lot of stuff to their veterans, which they should. They're entitled to them, One of the biggest pieces is the burial benefit at like Abraham Lincoln or other national cemeteries, but they'll cover the cost of the grave, the opening and closing of the grave, the vault, and the headstone. And they'll perform like military honors, taps and stuff like that, fold a flag. In order to have all that, all you need is a DD-214, your military discharge paperwork.
Which is super important to have.
Super important to have.
Trying to obtain that paperwork after the fact is a headache.
It's a headache, and it could take a while. But that one piece of paper can really just makes the total difference of what benefits are covered and whatnot.
So I think one question that I would have, and probably people who are watching would have, is in this business, have you ever found it difficult to separate work from personal, or having things kind of spill over? What has that experience been like for you?
We're not robots, you know what I mean, and stuff. So it's like, when there's sad things, it takes a toll on you. I remember, I don't know why this one came to mind, but like, we just had our first baby. We had our oldest is a girl. She was 5 months at the time. We got a call for a SIDS case, sudden infant death. The baby was 5 months too. Very similar. I went and made the removal, brought it back to the funeral home. They wanted to have a little service just for the immediate family and stuff. And I looked at the guys, I was like, nope, not a chance I could do that. And they're like, no, we got it. That's like just having a good team, good group of people, that you work with. They can see when something's affecting you and they jump in, or you could see when something's affecting them and vice versa, So yeah, I mean, I try not to bring it home, and stuff like that. I know, every once in a while there's stuff that's on your mind, or, if it's somebody young, not that you do more, but you just want to make sure everything's right, and stuff. So there's a lot of times where, my kids are still little, they go to bed early, and stuff. And I'll just tell my wife, like, I have to go back to work. And it happens all the time where I just go back cause I'm worried about something, or, it doesn't really it takes a toll, maybe mentally, I guess, but like, you just want to make sure everything is as good as it can be for that family.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate you kind of sharing your perspective on it, because I think I would say I feel the same way.
For sure.
It's like everyone talks about like boundaries and self-care and like doing all these things. And there's not like a one size fits all. You know what I mean? It's just as you said, we are people. We're not robots.
And you get emotionally involved with the families.
Yeah.
You know who the crazy uncle is. The brother and sisters who don't get along and stuff like that.
If you're actually involved in the case,
for sure,
you should know.
I mean, and just to bring it full circle, like I remember when I have a young face, I guess, and stuff like that. In the wintertime, I grow out a beard, and there was this. It's happened a few times, but they were like, how old are you? I'm like, oh, I got the kids, like this, blah, blah, blah. So this one lady was like, do you have any kids? And I was like, well, my wife's pregnant. Like, we're having a baby in like 2 months. She was like, and we had a really good rapport with the family and stuff. And they're like, well, what are you having, Ross? I'm like, I don't know. It's a surprise. You know, like, I was like, here's a picture of the ultrasound. I've been trying to like see if there's a boy or, you know, and so it was like just a good, you know, back and forth. We had our kid about a month later. This family came in and I was like, oh, hey, you know, give him hugs and stuff. And hope this isn't weird. Did you have a boy or a girl? I was like, oh, we had a girl. They're like, all right, here, this is for you. They had like 2 gifts that they brought. And I was like, that's so nice, you know? And they're like, you know, like you helped us out through the worst possible thing with their husband and stuff like that. They're like, we just wanted we felt like, you know, like whenever we meet, we still talk about you. So we wanted to see what your baby was, but we didn't know if it was like an appropriate thing and stuff. And we still see them and they still, if they're driving by, they'll come in and stuff. So
that's very
you
nice.
really get to know families on a pretty good level.
And I think that really speaks to your connection that you're developing with these families. And I think sometimes in healthcare and just in this industry as well, anything involved with death and dying, it become easy to think about, you know, someone who's doing it, they're doing their job. But at the same time, they go home, you go home every day, I go home every day. We have lives beyond this, right? And if we're doing the job well, we're going to have feelings one way or another about these cases, right? Some we might carry with us more than others for whatever reason, right? Everyone has their triggers, from their own experiences. This is just the reality of doing this. So I think part of it is just acknowledging that it's very real. You're allowed to feel sad and upset or whatever that might be. But, you know, I would hope that anyone watching would kind of recognize that too, right? If we're doing the job well, we think about these people too. We care.
It's a job, and you can't cry with every family or else nothing would get done.
Correct.
You know, you can't sit there and cry with every family. There's some families that hit you differently, you know, and stuff. And there's some families, you know, need a little bit more. And there's sometimes where there might be a family where one person's getting kind of bullied by the other ones and they can't get their say in it. So, you know, you just kind of, you have to navigate it, but there's always those families that stick out to you and the ones you remember and stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So for those listening, any parting words of wisdom or things that you would like to share?
Parting words of wisdom, that's big. I don't know if it's words of wisdom, but have the tough conversations before it's too late. You know what people's wishes are, know what they want, and know what's important to them. You know, everyone thinks they know everything about their spouse, their mother, their father, their brother, and stuff like that. But you might be surprised, you know, until you kind of have those tough conversations and really sit down with them, you don't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
And if you have a big family, get that power of healthcare.
Oh, that's a good one.
You know?
That's otherwise all sorts of other things can happen. Probably will happen. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching.